Hello and welcome. Today we're undertaking a comprehensive examination of the American pop rock band, the Bangles. Now, most people will, of course, recognize their name, probably from their massive radio presence in the 1980s.
That's very true. But that common perception,
Yeah.
it often stops at just a handful of their biggest hits.
Right. And the story is so much more than that. The commercial peak of the band, it tends to obscure the more complex reality of how they were formed, their musical origins, and even their longevity.
The public narrative is often just a few music videos. But the actual historical record, it reveals a journey that's far more significant, especially to the evolution of the Los Angeles music scene at the time.
Exactly. And our objective here is to move beyond that surface level, beyond just those major radio hits. We're going to trace their origins back to a scene known as the Paisley Underground. We'll follow their entire career trajectory right up to their current activities and really analyze the specific mechanics of their rise, their disbandment, and their eventual reformation.
And we will be looking at this strictly through the factual record. We'll examine their evolution from a 1960s influenced garage rock band to, well, mainstream pop dominance.
And a key part of that is the internal dynamics. This was a collaborative band, but they were operating inside an industry that really pressured them to identify a single frontwoman.
Yes, that's a critical point. And of course, we'll cover the reunion and their status today. The tone for our discussion will be serious and informative. This is a biography of professional musicians, and we're going to treat it with the appropriate level of detail.
There is a lot to cover. So let's begin at the very, very beginning. The formation. We're talking Los Angeles, 1980.
The timeline begins specifically in December of 1980. And you have to understand, the LA music scene was in a real state of flux then. It was moving away from the punk rock explosion of the late 70s and sort of searching for new sounds.
And the formation of the Bangles, it centers on three key individuals to start with. You have Susanna Hoffs, and then the two sisters, Vicki and Debbie Peterson.
And it's important to note, they weren't novices. All three of them had been involved in other bands before this meeting.
But the way they came together, it wasn't some chance meeting at a club, which is the story for so many bands. It was the classified ads, specifically in a weekly paper called The Recycler.
The Recycler was a critical tool for musicians in Los Angeles at that time.
Yeah.
Before the internet, this was how you found people. Physical classifieds were really the primary method for putting a band together.
And the record here shows a very specific series of connections and even missed connections. Susanna Hoffs placed an ad looking for bandmates. At the same time, a woman named Lynn Elkind placed a separate ad.
Right, and Lynn Elkind was the housemate of the Peterson sisters. This is the key link. She was actually leaving a band that she was in with Vicki and Debbie, a band called Those Girls.
So you have two separate ads. Hoffs has one, Elkind has one. And Hoffs, she responds to Elkind's ad. She calls the number on the paper.
But Lynn Elkind doesn't answer the phone. Vicki Peterson does.
And that phone call, that right there is the pivotal moment. Instead of just taking a message for her housemate, Hoffs and Vicki Peterson start talking.
And they discover they have this significant overlap in their interests, specifically their musical influences. The Beatles, a lot of other 1960s rock groups, a real shared language.
But then when Hoffs finally does speak to Lynn Elkind, the person she was originally trying to call,
the connection just isn't there. They didn't share those same musical touchstones. So as a result, Hoffs decides to forget about that, instead form a new band with the Peterson sisters.
But there was still a missing piece. The Petersons band, Those Girls, they had just lost their bass guitarist, a woman named Amanda Hills.
Yes, who was Vicki Peterson's lifelong best friend.
And as a quick aside, what happened to her?
Amanda Hills actually left the music world to pursue academia. She's now a history professor, Dr. Amanda Hills Padani. She has, on very rare occasions, performed as a guest with the Bangles, but she was out of the lineup at this critical moment in late 1980.
So that left an opening for a bassist. And this takes us back to The Recycler. We can't forget that Susanna Hoffs had placed her own ad, not just responded to one.
And the only person to respond to Hoffs' own ad was Annette Zelinskas.
So Hoffs gets in touch with Zelinskas and says, look, I'm now forming a group with these two sisters. Are you interested in playing bass?
Zelinskas accepted. And that solidified the very first lineup. You have Susanna Hoffs on vocals and guitar, Vicki Peterson on guitar and vocals, Debbie Peterson on drums and vocals, and Annette Zelinskas on bass and vocals.
A four-piece band. But they didn't immediately call themselves the Bangles. In 1981, for their first performances, they went by the name The Colors.
That was a very short-lived name. Shortly after, they renamed themselves the Bangs.
And it's really important to contextualize their sound at this time. This was not the polished pop music that would later make them famous. They were firmly embedded in that scene we mentioned earlier, the Paisley Underground. So let's define that term. What exactly was the Paisley Underground?
It was a very specific music movement in Los Angeles in the early 80s. It was a collection of groups that played this mixture of 1960s influenced rock, psychedelia, and garage rock.
So jangly guitars, power pop sensibilities.
Very much so. It was a revivalist movement, but it had a distinctly 1980s energy to it. It wasn't just imitation.
And under this name, the Bangs, they start their recording career. In 1981, Hoffs and the Petersons record and release a single.
That was Getting Out of Hand, with Call on Me on the B-side. And they released this on their own label, which they called Down Kitty Records.
So right from the get-go, a very proactive, do-it-yourself spirit.
It was. And that self-starting approach got them attention. It led to them being signed to a label called Faulty Products,
which was formed by Miles Copeland, a name that will be familiar to many. He's often associated with the police, IRS records, a big figure in the industry.
Yes. And with Faulty Products, the band recorded an EP in 1982. They released a single from it called The Real World. But just as they were starting to gain some momentum, they hit a legal hurdle.
With their name.
With their name. This happened immediately before the EP was supposed to be released. They were all set to play a release show at the Lhasa Club in Hollywood.
And at the last minute.
At the last minute, they discovered that another band, a band on the East Coast, had already registered the name The Bangs.
And that other band, they weren't willing to let them use the name without a payment.
Correct. So to avoid the legal issues and what would have been a significant financial burden for a new band, they were forced to change their name on the spot.
And they simply modified the Bangs.
To the Bangles. It was a quick, practical solution.
Now, during the same period, there was another project that really shows how embedded they were in that Paisley Underground scene, the Rainy Day Project.
Yes, the Rainy Day album is a key artifact of that whole scene. It was a collaborative album, released in 1984, but recorded a bit earlier, and it featured members from all the key bands of the scene. Rain Parade, the Dream Syndicate, the 3 O'Clock.
And Susanna Hoffs and Vicki Peterson were part of this?
They were. Hoffs provided the lead vocals on 2 cover songs, Bob Dylan's I'll Keep It With Mine and Lou Reed's I'll Be Your Mirror. It really demonstrates how interconnected and collaborative that specific Los Angeles scene was before any of those bands, especially the Bangles, achieved global fame.
So, returning to their own releases, the first EP is retitled Bangles and it finally gets released. But then they face another industry setback.
Their label, Faulty Products, folded. It just went out of business.
But fortunately, Miles Copeland's other label, IRS Records, picked up the distribution and they reissued the EP. But then, in 1983, the lineup itself goes through its first major change.
Annette Zelinskas decided to depart the band.
Why was that?
She left to focus on her own project, a band called Blood on the Saddle, which had more of a cowpunk sound. It was a different musical direction.
So this creates a vacancy for a bassist, and the musician who fills this role is Michael Steele.
Michael Steele, who brought a very different resume to the group. She had formerly been a member of the Runaways, the pioneering all-female rock band.
A very different kind of band.
Very. She had also played with groups like Tony and the Movers, Slow Children, and Elton Duck. She had a lot of experience in the LA scene.
And her addition, it's widely considered to have cemented what we now think of as the classic lineup of the Bangles.
It did. Her background in the punk and rock scenes of LA really complemented the existing dynamic. So with this lineup set, they signed to a major label, Columbia Records, for their full-length debut album.
And this brings us to the album All Over the Place, which was released in 1984. This album, it's often cited by music historians as capturing their power pop roots more authentically than some of their later, more famous work.
It received very positive critical reviews. The sound was characterized by energetic guitars, those tight vocal harmonies. 2 key singles came from that album, Hero Takes a Fall and Going Down to Liverpool.
Going Down to Liverpool has a particularly interesting story behind it. It wasn't written by them.
No, it was written by Kimberly Rue of the band Katrina and the Waves. And it has that very distinct, almost Beatles-esque quality to it.
And the promotion for that single included a music video that got a lot of attention, primarily because it featured the actor Leonard Nimoy.
Yes, Mr. Smog.
How did that happen?
The connection was personal. The Nimoy family and Susanna Hoffs' family were friends, and this friendship allowed them to secure a major television star for their video, which It helped generate a lot of publicity for a band that was still relatively unknown on a national level.
And to support all over the place, the band toured extensively. A really major part of this period was them serving as the opening act for Cyndi Lauper.
That was on her Fun tour.
Yeah.
And that tour exposed them to a much wider, much more mainstream audience than the club scene in Los Angeles ever could have.
Right. It was a huge step up. And that exposure, it really set the stage for their massive commercial breakthrough. Which brings us to the era of their second album, Different Light, released in January of 1986. This is where the trajectory of the band just shifts vertically.
A major factor in this shift was the attention of the artist Prince. He had taken notice of the band, he liked their sound, and he gave him a song.
A song called Manic Monday.
And the history of that song is notable. Prince had originally written it for one of his own groups, Apollonia 6, but he decided to give it to the Bangles instead.
And they recorded it, and it just became a massive, massive hit.
It reached #2 in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Germany. It was a global smash.
And there's an interesting bit of chart trivia there. It was kept out of the #1 spot on the charts by another song Prince had written.
Yes, by his own song, Kiss. So he essentially had a lock on the top 2 spots on the charts that week.
An incredible achievement. So while Manic Monday really opened the door for them on a global scale, the song that truly solidified their status was Walk Like an Egyptian.
This track was written by a songwriter named Liam Sternberg. But the internal dynamics regarding this song, they were complicated.
How so? The band wasn't keen on it.
The group was completely divided on whether the song would be a success or a total failure. It was sent to them while they were already in the middle of a recording session for the album. It was a late edition.
But despite that internal hesitation, the commercial impact was just undeniable.
Walk Like an Egyptian became a #1 hit and a true worldwide phenomenon, and it fundamentally changed the demographic of their audience.
In what way?
Michael Seal commented on this specifically. She noted that before this song, they were recognized by a broader mix of people. But after Walk Like an Egyptian, there was a very distinct influx of young female fans. Their audience became much younger.
The album Different Light wasn't just those 2 songs, though. It produced other hits as well.
It did. Walking Down Your Street reached #11 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. Following was a top 40 hit in Ireland.
And then there was If She Knew What She Wants.
Right, which was written and first recorded by Jules Shear. The Bangles version did very well. It reached #29 in the U.S., and it spent 13 weeks in the German top 20.
But the sound of Different Light, it was markedly different from their debut album.
Oh, yes. It was far more polished. The raw, garage rock edges of their Paisley Underground days were smoothed out, really, in favor of a production style that fit perfectly into the mid-'80s mainstream radio format.
And that shift, it absolutely contributed to their success. But you could also say it sowed the seeds for some future artistic disagreements.
It's a classic dilemma for a band with those kinds of roots.
In between their album cycles, the band kept their momentum going with a key soundtrack contribution. In 1987, they released a cover.
A cover of the Simon & Garfunkel song, Hazy Shade of Winter.
This was recorded for the soundtrack of the film Less Than Zero.
And it was a very significant hit in its own right.
Yeah.
It reached #2 on the charts in February of 1988. And it's notable because it showcased a return to a slightly harder rock sound compared to some of the lighter pop material on Different Light.
So moving forward to 1988, the band released their third album, titled Everything, and for this record, there was a change in personnel behind the scenes.
They chose a new producer, David Sigerson. The reason for this change was that the band had reportedly had a negative reaction to working with David Kahn, who had produced Different Light. They were looking for a different kind of working environment.
And Everything was another multi-platinum success. It included the top 5 hit In Your Room. But the truly enduring legacy of this album is the ballad.
Eternal Flame.
Their biggest selling single, their biggest worldwide hit.
It holds the distinction of being the biggest single by an all-female band in history. A monumental song for them.
And the origin of the song's title is very specific. It wasn't just a random phrase.
No. The co-writer, Billy Steinberg, he came up with the title after Susanna Hoffs described a trip the band had taken to Memphis, Tennessee.
They had visited Graceland, Elvis Presley's estate.
Correct. And at Graceland, there is an eternal flame that's maintained at Presley's grave. However, on the day that the band visited, there had been heavy rain and flooding, and the flame had actually gone out.
So the eternal flame wasn't so eternal that day.
It was not. Haas described seeing the clear plastic enclosure that was supposed to protect it just flooded with water. And when they asked a guide what was in the box, they were told, that's the eternal flame. And that phrase, the eternal flame, it just stuck with Steinberg.
There's also an unusual documented detail regarding the recording process for the vocals on that track.
There is. David Sigerson, the producer, convinced Susanna Hoffs to record her vocals while she was naked.
And what was the rationale for that?
Well, the story Sigerson told her was that Olivia Newton-John obtained her best, most vulnerable performances by recording in that state. Hoffs later described the experience as feeling like skinny dipping. She apparently felt it worked because she proceeded to record most of the rest of the album that way. It was a production technique, certainly an unconventional one.
So despite the massive success of Eternal Flame and the album Everything, this period, 1989, it actually marked the beginning of the end for this version of the band. Tensions were rising among the members.
The primary cause of this friction was the media narrative. The music industry press, the magazines, MTV, they began singling out Susanna Hoffs as the lead singer of the group.
Which was not the reality of how the band operated.
Not at all. It completely contradicted the internal reality. The vocal duties were divided. All four members wrote or co-wrote songs. They functioned as a democratic unit. And this external pressure to elevate one member over the others, it created an unsustainable dynamic.
And so, as a consequence of all this friction,
the band officially disbanded in 1989, at the peak of their fame.
Following that breakup, the members all pursued different paths. Susanna Hoffs, she began a solo career.
Vicki Peterson toured with a group called the Continental Drifters, and she also served as a fill-in touring member for the Go-Go's for a time.
And Michael Steele.
Michael Steele joined a band called Crash Wisdom. It was a short-lived project, but is notable because some of the songs that would later appear on a Bangles reunion album, specifically Nickel Romeo and Between the Two, were actually developed during this period with Crash Wisdom.
So this hiatus, it lasts for nearly a decade. The Reformation process doesn't begin until 1998. What was the catalyst?
The catalyst was the film industry. The director Jay Roach asked the band if they would record a song for the movie Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me.
And of course, there was a personal connection there as well. Jay Roach had married Susanna Hoffs back in 1993.
That's right. So the band agreed, and they recorded a song titled Get the Girl, which was released in 1999 on the movie's soundtrack.
And that one-off studio collaboration, it led to more.
It did. It led to a resumption of touring in the year 2000. And that same year, they were officially inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame.
And all of this activity, it eventually culminated in a brand new studio album. From 2001 to 2002, they were in Icon Recording Studios working on it.
The album was titled Doll Revolution, and it was released in early 2003.
The title track, Doll Revolution, that has another interesting connection. It was written by Elvis Costello.
Yes. He had originally recorded it for his own album, When I Was Cruel, but offered it to them. The Bangles album featured tracks like Stealing Rosemary, Ride the Ride, and the lead single, Something That You Said. And it also included those Michael Steele songs we mentioned earlier, Nickel Romeo and Between the Two.
How is Doll Revolution received commercially?
It had a very mixed reception. It was a solid success in Germany, for example, where the band performed on a major television show called Wetten, Das, but had a much more limited impact in the United States, the UK, and Australia.
In July of 2004, the band received a pretty unique honor from Paul McCartney.
They did. He presented them with honorary diplomas from LIPA, the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, which he founded.
But despite that kind of recognition, the internal issues, they seem to have resurfaced. In 2005, Michael Steele left the band again.
The stated reasons for her departure involved disputes over touring schedules and recording plans. And this marked the end of that classic quartet lineup for another significant period of time.
And to fulfill their live commitments, the band brought in Abby Travis as a touring bassist.
Travis remained with the band until 2008 when she was fired. The core group, the remaining members, Hoffs and the two Peterson sisters, they continued on as a trio. And in the spring of 2009, they went back into the studio.
This work resulted in the album Sweetheart of the Sun, which was released on September 27, 2011.
And they supported this album with a tour in late 2011, playing dates across the East Coast, the Midwest, and the West Coast. They had supporting acts like Antigone Rising and A Fragile Tomorrow.
A very significant event in their later career occurred in December of 2013, something that brought them full circle in a way, the Paisley Underground reunion.
Yes, they revisited their roots. In 2013, the Bangles played 2 nights, one in San Francisco and one in Los Angeles, alongside the other key bands from that scene, the Dream Syndicate, the 3 O'Clock, and Rain Parade.
And the set lists for these shows, they were very specific.
Very. They focused almost exclusively on their early material, songs that the band had not played in 30 years. It was a very deliberate return to their origins.
This sort of look back continued into January 2014, when they performed at the Whiskey A Go-Go to celebrate the venue's 50th anniversary.
And around this same time, we see the return of a founding member. Annette Zelinskas, who had left all the way back in 1983, began joining the band for selected shows starting in 2014.
And she officially rejoined the band full-time in 2018.
Which was hugely significant because it marked the first time that the original founding four members, Hoffs, the Peterson sisters, and Zelinskas, had played together as a unit since 1983.
And this reunion of the original lineup, it coincided with a very interesting recording project called 3x4.
Yes. 3x4 was a compilation album released in 2018. It again featured the Bangles, the Dream Syndicate, the 3 O'Clock, and Rain Parade, the whole Paisley Underground cohort.
And the concept is that each of the four bands would cover songs by the other three bands.
Exactly. It was a tribute to each other and to the scene they created. It was released in November 2018 for Black Friday Record Store Day on a special psychedelic swirl vinyl, with a general release following in February 2019.
And to promote this project, all four of those bands assembled to play together at the Grammy Museum in May of 2019.
Which really cemented the reunion of that scene.
And that brings us more or less to the present day. The current lineup of the band consists of Vicki Peterson, Susanna Hoffs, Debbie Peterson, and the returning Annette Zelinskas.
They remain an active entity, still carrying the legacy of both their massive pop hits and their garage rock origins.
It's just a remarkable journey when you lay it all out. We've traced them from the classified ads of the Recycler in 1980, through the small clubs of the Paisley Underground, all the way to the absolute heights of international superstardom, then the breakup, and finally this reformation and a return to their original personnel.
When you summarize their legacy, they absolutely stand as one of the most successful pop rock groups of the 1980s. That's undeniable. But I think more importantly, they are a band that successfully bridged the gap between a credible underground 1960s revivalist scene and the highly polished mechanics of the mainstream charts.
A very difficult line to walk.
It is. They navigated immense industry pressure regarding their image and their internal structure, and they eventually returned to a dynamic that honored their beginnings.
It's really a story of resilience and of a fascinating musical evolution. We hope this examination has provided a much clearer picture of the musicians and the history behind those hits.
Indeed. It's a complex history, and one worth understanding in its entirety.
Thanks for listening.